Your raised bed is failing you. You spent $80 on seeds this spring, drove to the garden center twice, built a 4 by 8 foot box, and you are still running to the grocery store every week for vegetables. Now go back to 1280, a peasant woman in Lincolnshire. England fed her family of 6 from a garden patch no bigger than a dining table. No fertilizer bags, no garden center, no irrigation system. Just 5 plants she inherited from her mother, who inherited them from hers. Those plants gave her greens in February, roots in November, and medicine in August. She never went hungry. You can't even keep basil alive. Your supermarket vegetable aisle is a lie dressed in plastic clamshells. Walk down it right now and count what you see. Iceberg, lettuce, bred for shelf life, not nutrition. Baby carrots, which aren't baby carrots at all, but misshapen adult carrots that have been machine-shaved and bleached with chlorinated water. Zucchini so watery it disintegrates when you cook it. Bell peppers waxed to a shine that has nothing to do with freshness and everything to do with making you reach for your wallet. Every single vegetable on that shelf was selected for one thing: how well it survives a truck ride, not how well it survives in your body. But here is the part that should stop you cold. In monasteries across medieval Germany, in peasant plots outside York, in cottage gardens along the Rhine Valley, ordinary people with no money, no technology, and sometimes less than 9 square feet of growing space were pulling vegetables out of the ground that we now pay premium prices for in specialty health stores. Vegetables with more iron than spinach, roots sweeter than sugar cane, greens that came back every single spring for 20 years without replanting, and they grew all of it in a space smaller than your bathroom. They didn't have Instagram gardening influencers. They had hunger, and hunger is a brilliant teacher. Let's go back to that Lincolnshire garden. It was called a wort yard, from the Old English word for plant. These weren't decorative, they were survival infrastructure. A monastery survey from 1263 recorded the plants grown in the kitchen gardens of 8 manors across England. Beans, leeks, onions, parsnips, and a handful of plants, so deeply forgotten today that most modern gardeners have never heard their names. Skirret, Good King Henry, Rampion, Alexanders. These weren't weeds. They were the result of centuries of selection, of farmers watching what grew thick in poor soil, what survived a hard frost, what kept a sick child alive in January. Every plant in that wort yard earned its place the hard way. The ones that didn't perform were ripped out. The ones that performed were saved, seeded, and passed down. Your modern garden center does the opposite. They sell you whatever has the most attractive seed packet, whatever was profitable to breed this season, whatever shipping company can deliver fastest. And they sell you plants that need constant intervention to survive, because a plant that struggles is a plant that keeps you buying. Let's talk about the first plant, because this is where it gets genuinely remarkable. Skirret. Write that name down. Botanically, it is Siam cicerum, and it has been grown in European gardens since the Romans carried it north across the Alps. In the medieval period, it was so common and so valued that it appeared in the household accounts of the English royal court. Henry VIII ate skirret, so did the poorest peasant in the kingdom. That alone should tell you something. The nutritional profile is extraordinary. Good King Henry contains more iron than commercial spinach. It is rich in calcium, vitamin C, and folate. It grows in partial shade, tolerates poor soil, requires no fertilizer once established, and spreads slowly enough to remain manageable in a small space. You can grow 4 plants in a 3-foot square patch, and harvest from them continuously for 15 to 20 years. Medieval peasants knew this. The system never touches it, because a plant that grows itself, feeds you for 20 years, and costs nothing to maintain after the first season, is a commercial design logic of the medieval wort yard. Because this is where peasant farmers were practicing something that modern horticulturalists have only recently rediscovered and given an expensive name. They called it companion planting and intensive layering. Endlessly practical. Tall plants with deep roots were planted alongside short plants with shallow roots. The tall plants provided shade that the short plants needed in summer heat. The short plants kept the soil covered, preventing the moisture loss that the tall plants needed to survive drought. The deep roots broke up the subsoil, pulling up nutrients that the shallow roots could then access after the deep roots died back. Every plant was doing multiple jobs. Every square inch was producing something, in a 3-foot by 3-foot space. A medieval gardener might grow leeks along the back edge because they grew tall and vertical, taking up almost no horizontal footprint. Front edge, lambs, lettuce, or landcress, low-growing plants that harvested in autumn and winter, exactly when the parsnips and leeks were dormant. 3 crops, 3 different harvest windows. 9 square feet. Almost no input. Skirret is a root vegetable that grows in clusters, like thick white fingers radiating outward from a central crown. The flavor is extraordinary, sweet, slightly nutty, almost parsnip-like, but with a warmth that parsnips don't have. The Romans roasted them in honey. Medieval cooks boiled them with butter and spices. You can roast them, mash them, fry them in fat. They are skirret astonishing for small space growing. One plant produces multiple roots from a single crown. You plant one crown in a space roughly 9 inches in diameter. By autumn, you pull up a cluster of 8 to 12 separate roots from that single spot. Plant it every year. You divide the crown in spring, replant the divisions, and the plant multiple grow is exactly where skirret was traditionally planted. Against a north-facing fence, under fruit trees, in the corner where the sun never reaches, ate skirret through winter had more energy than the ones who didn't. The result was the same. The reason skirret disappeared is the same reason most things disappear from our food system. Easier to process at industrial scale, cheaper to grow in vast fields, and it yielded more raw calories per acre. Skirret required more care, more hand labor, more knowledge. So the knowledge died with the people who held it, and the plant almost vanished from the world entirely. Now let's talk about Good King Henry, which has one of the most accurate names in all of botany. The oldest continuously cultivated vegetables in human history. Good King Henry is a perennial green. Once established, it comes back every single year without any intervention. It pushes up in early spring, sometimes through snow, producing dark arrow-shaped leaves that taste mild and slightly earthy, like spinach, but richer. In early summer, the plant sends up flower shoots that are eaten exactly like asparagus. In late summer, it produces seeds. The entire plant is edible at different. Compare that to a modern raised bed planted with one variety of tomato. You put in $40 of plants. You stake them, water them every day, feed them every week, spray them for pests, and you get tomatoes for 8 weeks in summer. Then the season ends, and the bed sits empty for 9 months. That is not farming. That is an expensive hobby with a vegetable-flavored outcome. The parsnip deserves its own moment here, because the medieval relationship with this root is something modern food culture has completely erased. The parsnip was medieval Europe's sweetener. Before cane sugar was widely available, before the Caribbean trade made sugar cheap, the parsnip provided the sweetness that made hard lives bearable. Medieval cooks boiled parsnips and drew off the liquid, reducing it to a syrup that was used the way we used honey or sugar. They made parsnip wine, parsnip pudding, parsnip fritters, fried in lard, that travelers reported tasting like something, and it is a supremely efficient small space crop. You can grow parsnips in a container 12 inches deep. You can grow 16 parsnips in a single square foot of ground, though they perform better at 9 per square foot. You plant them once in early spring, and you harvest the sat in frozen ground for a week, tastes sweeter than anything in the produce section of any grocery store anywhere in the country. This is why the medieval farmer didn't need dessert. His root cellar was full of it. Then there is the leek, which is perhaps the most underestimated vegetable in human history. The leek was so important to Welsh identity that it became their national symbol. In medieval gardens across Europe, leeks were grown not as a garnish or a flavoring agent, but as a primary food source, layered into bread. The leek's value in a small garden is almost unmatched. It grows vertically. A single leek occupies roughly 3 inches of horizontal space. You can plant 16 leeks in a single square foot of garden, though 6 is more realistic for good-sized leeks. They remain in the ground through frost, through snow, through temperatures that kill every other living plant in your garden. Any of this chemistry. The reason we stopped growing leeks seriously is partly the same reason we abandoned everything else in this story. Industrial efficiency. A leek takes 6 months from seed to harvest. It doesn't pack well because it bruises easily. It doesn't look dramatic in a produce display, so the industry pivoted to onions, which process faster, ship harder, and sell by volume. The nutritional difference between an onion and a leek is real, but invisible to a supermarket buyer whose only metric is margin per pallet. So what do you do with all of this? The answer is simpler than any modern gardening book will ever admit. Because modern gardening books need to sell you things. It holds 3 square feet of soil at least 12 inches deep. You need to understand that the plants doing the most work in a small space are perennials and uprooted annuals. Not the pretty things the garden center puts on display in April. You plant skirret in one corner and leave it there for 10 years. You plant good King Henry along the edge that gets parted through winter. You grow parsnips in the deep center soil and harvest them after frost when they are sweetest. None of these plants needs daily watering once established. None of them needs synthetic fertilizer. None of them collapses at the first sign of cold weather. They were selected over centuries specifically to endure the conditions that modern hybrid vegetables cannot survive. The medieval farmer with a dirt floor and a wood axe wasn't gardening as a hobby. He was gardening as infrastructure. His wort yard was his pharmacy, his grocery store, and his food security, all compressed into a few square feet outside his door. He chose plants that asked little and gave much. He layered them so that every inch produced something. He grew perennials so that his work in year 1 paid dividends in year 10. We replaced that system with annual monocultures, hybrid seeds that don't reproduce true, and a dependency on garden centers that sell us the same 6 varieties every spring. We traded resilience for aesthetics and called it progress. But the plants are still here. Skirret seeds can be found from specialty seed suppliers. Good King Henry is making a quiet return through heritage seed networks. Parsnips never left. They were just demoted to a side dish nobody ordered. And leeks grow so easily from seed that you can start them on a windowsill in February and have plants in the ground by May. The medieval farmer's 3 square foot garden didn't feed his family through luck. It fed them through centuries of accumulated knowledge about which plants do the most work in the least space. Knowledge that the modern seed industry has no financial incentive to preserve. Less space isn't in a new raised bed kit or a bag of specialty fertilizer. It is in the plants themselves, the ones that were working long before we forgot them, the ones that are still willing to work if you are willing to remember. Plant skirret, grow good King Henry. Put leeks in the ground in May and pull them in January. Grow parsnips until the frost hits them, and then taste what a vegetable is actually supposed to be. The medieval gardener wasn't primitive. He was precise. He built food security into 9 square feet of earth, and it worked for 800 years. Your 3 square feet of ground can do the same. Subscribe, and let's keep digging up what they've buried.